Hello, Eli here again with Full Performance. Just want to give you an update on that little Mazda RX8. So definitely ran some issues with that. So, as you see, I got the engine pulled out of it. So initially when I got this thing fired up and working, like I said in the last video, the turbo was spooling, but nothing was happening. Ended up finding out that in there every single boot on intercooler or any kind of charge pipe was ripped one way or another, and it was just puking air through those. So I redid all those boot connections. The thing seemed to be running okay. It was still kind of boggy here and there. Cleaned the mass airflow sensor, did a few just piddly things thinking it would clean it up. Doing those charge pipes helped it immensely. So it did start to see boost pressure. I did have an aftermarket boost controller on it. And when I finally started to see boost, the thing was going over boost. My gauge was showing it bumping almost 10, and I wasn't even getting into the throttle. That boost controller itself, I ended up turning it all the way back in. It was 3.5 turns out, which was way too much. Got all that sorted, went out for a drive, got it home, and noticed it was going over boost again. Went out and messed with the boost controller, and it had backed itself out just within a 10-minute drive, like nothing. So I turned it back in, went out back the next morning, drove it up to the corner, which was about 4 blocks away from my house, checked it, and it walked itself back out. So I turned it all the way back in, and then I decided to open it up about half a turn. My boy was with me. I romped on it. The thing went way over boost. I glanced down my shot boost gauge. So keep this in mind too. I was flying blind at this time. I didn't have boost gauge on it. I didn't have AFR on it. I didn't have anything. Just pretty much flying blind except for my shot boost gauge. The thing snapped, hauled butt, spun the tires over, took my boost gauge, and it pegged it out. It only goes up to about 12 pounds. So I'm not sure what it was seeing, but as soon as I let off, blah, 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 it toast, gone. Limped it back to the shop, did a compression test on it. Front rotor was showing 0 on 2 faces, 30 on 1, and then it was showing in between 60 and 70 in the back. So I kind of knew that one was toast. I was able to look inside there. I didn't see anything jumping out, but I was definitely seeing metal particles. I pulled the oil filter out. I didn't see a whole lot of nastiness going in there, but I just wanted to confirm, that was my issue. So what I ended up doing is I ended up buying a wrecked parts car. Had about 70,000 miles on it. Auction didn't say if it ran or not. Luckily I got it here, pulled the engine out of it. It had decent compression. It was still on the low side. I think it was like 70 to 80, still pretty low, but swapped it out nonetheless. And I probably should have left the turbo off at that point just to get myself a good baseline, because this thing does have that e-management piggyback system. And to tell you the truth, I haven't been able to plug into it with a computer to just see what the maps are doing and see what kind of data logs are on it. But while I was having my scan tool plugged in, when I could catch it, I know that thing was seeing extremely high timing at like 3,500 RPM, barely loading it up. It was 44 degrees. Started looking at some of the other timing maps, and that sounds like a stock NA timing map, and that's what it looked like from Mazda. Poking around online, there's another guy that posted something from the e-management, and it was pretty much the same timing table. So I think the timing was way too aggressive on this thing. And that's what popped the first one. Got the second one in there, ran it for a while. I ended up getting an AFR gauge and a regular boost gauge on it. I took that stupid boost controller out of there and just ran a direct line from the intake down to the wastegate. And now it was only seeing at most 6.5, 7 pounds, which was probably about right. Made all the right noises, had good pull to it, nothing horrible. AFRs were extremely rich. So when you got on this thing, it would dip 10.5, 10. I mean, just dumping the fuel out of it. And you could tell when you fired it up in the morning, I mean, it'd make your eyes hurt because it was running so damn rich. So a couple of things going on there. I think the timing was way too aggressive. I believe that the fuel map was way too rich. So it was initially just washing the rotor housings out. This thing has a pretty quiet exhaust on it. All it is a greddy catback exhaust. There's a test pipe, so there's no catalyst converter or nothing on it. When I fire it up in the mornings, it was getting kind of colder. When I fired up in the mornings, I could hear a distinct tick, almost like a lifter tick you could hear, you know? I'm like, what is that? What is that? Well, disconnected the air pump on it. Seemed to help a little bit, but then I was noticing more and more and more. I ended up smoke testing the exhaust system completely. Come to find out, the greddy exhaust manifold had a pretty good sized crack in it. You know, when it was cold, the crack was open, and as everything swelled, the crack would close up. That could have been another reason why I was seeing stupid readings on the upstream O2 sensor. O2 sensor was still showing that it was running lean sometimes, even though my AFR on the backside was saying it was stupid rich. Another thing I don't like about the e-management stuff is that it's fooling everything. My long-term and short-term fuel trims were just kind of all over the place. So when you went full throttle with this thing, it would take the short-term fuel trims and put them to 0. And this thing was just dumping the fuel in, I think. And as soon as it let off, everything would go back to normal, and it would be sitting there trying to trim it back leaner, leaner, leaner. So definitely a few different issues going on with that computer system. I still haven't been able to find an old school laptop I can plug into this thing to see what the hell's going on with it, but we'll move on from that. So process is now, oh, that engine actually popped too, and I was barely into it. I got about 800 miles out of that one before it actually popped. So I'm going to turn this one down and see exactly what's going on with it. I actually do have an 85 GSLSE engine sitting in the back of my shop. It was actually my first car. I wrecked it, but the engine and training was still good and I held on to it. I'm considering maybe a hybrid build. We'll see. I'd really like to keep this thing boosted if I could, but to keep it on the safe side, I'm probably just going to go NA for now, probably all stock stuff, and just see, you know, how it functions so I get used to the car and make sure everything's working the way it should before we start putting boost to it and hurting shit. A lot of back and forth with turbo crap on these rx8 motors. They're not really good for boosted application because the engine isn't really set up for it. But if I can use that old GSLSE motor, which, you know, it's kind of a big clunky thing, but a lot of things are interchangeable. I'd like to have a halfway decent, you know, reliable 400 horse if I can get it. I know that's probably a little too much for one of these rx8s, but we'll see. Just wanted to give you guys an update on it and start tearing this keg down.